Hello and welcome to the channel. This is a Kunwoo knife. I think that's how you pronounce the company name. This is the X-Tao model here. One of two of the knives that I had picked up a while ago after watching some other reviews on this, including Metal Complexes. And I'm not trying to be incredibly negative, but I got some grievances on these knives, and I just kind of wanted to talk through them and some other thoughts here. I'm going to try to compact quite a bit of information, so I might go a little quicker than I would otherwise. That's kind of the whole idea here. But yeah, first off, I can say love the orange peel texture on the titanium that they've done here. It is kind of a little step above just the standard sandblast that we got going on here. This is a Tucson TS108. It's not particularly a great knife, but it did help me actually point out the sandblast finish there. So when I got this knife, first off, opened it up and went, "Wow, this is nice. Feels nice and heavy." And then I noticed that the crossbar, the detent on it is very lazy. You can easily deploy it, but you need to put a lot more effort into it than you would from other knives that have bearings in the pivot, and especially like crossbar locks and stuff like that. This thing has a very easy time um, getting past that detent. So the detent doesn't do a very good job of trying to keep this thing closed. I would prefer it to be a little stronger. It did come with extra Omega springs in the box, and I thought that was a great idea. More companies need to include some extra hardware in the box. However, those Omega springs were really rusty and crusty. They had some sort of white corrosion on them as well as rust. I ended up cleaning them off with some quad zero steel wool and flits and stuff like that. But then I thought it's possible that those Omega springs were to help customize it, and maybe they were stronger than the ones that were in there. So I opened the knife up, and the Omega springs that were installed also rusty and crusty with that same rust and white corrosion on there. So I swapped out the Omega springs and put the original ones after I cleaned those up. Put them back in the box. I did have footage of that 3 or 4 months ago. I had a hard drive failure and lost that footage, unfortunately. So that's just kind of how that goes. But that's the situation that I had with the crossbar lock. But still, they had the exact same tension on there. So I would like to see stronger crossbar or Omega springs on these guys in the future. That would be great. Next up, we got the wire pocket clips on these guys. I have seen some titanium milled pocket clips on other even Tao models from Kunwoo, but this one has a wire pocket clip, and it's one that feels maybe just like a large paper clip. I'm much more of a fan of Spyderco's older style ones that were very stiff. These guys, if they get caught on something, most likely going to be your seatbelt in your vehicle or something like that. They get bent out of shape, and they're next to impossible to actually get back into place. So it is frustrating. It does. They do give you another one of these in the box along with the Omega springs, so that's great. But I would have had the option, I would have elected for a titanium milled pocket clip just for the extra rigidity and just feeling maybe a little bit nicer for the nice price point, which is I think they were around $270 or something like that. So part of the huge selling factor on these guys is the fancy blade steel here, Elmax in this case, which is a fairly expensive steel that Böhler Oderholm makes alongside M390 and a whole bunch of other stuff. But it's not quite as in demand as M390 is. So it's getting up and up in price. So it's not a cheap blade steel. It's another powder metallurgy steel. It's supposed to have a lot of edge retention capabilities on there. And I haven't really had a huge amount of experience with it prior, but I was expecting a bit more out of it. Now, I did do a reprofile on this guy to 15 degrees behind the edge here. I did accidentally scratch up just a little bit of the blade surface there. Happened with my Work Sharp Precision Adjust. Not sure exactly why or how that ended up happening on it, but it did. It's just cosmetic. The knife still cuts fine. But what worried me is that this thing reprofiled and sharpened way too quick. And there is a little bit of variance in how a knife will end up feeling when you're doing sharpening and stuff like that on there. But this guy took like about 40 minutes to do a full 15-degree reprofile from the about 19 and a half or so that it was out of the factory. Which is pretty worrisome because that's generally the kind of feel that I end up getting out of either some softer 14C28N or some of the other stuff like 1.4116 or something like that. Nothing really crazy difficult to end up sharpening. And that was with the standard Work Sharp Precision Adjust. So the one with the 1/2 inch by 4 inch diamond stones on there, not the newer one that's got 1 inch by 6 inch stones on there. So yeah, the blade steel on that felt really, really soft. However, I actually have a bit more proof that that's probably the case here, and we can see this line going on up top here on the blade. That didn't come out of the factory. What caused that was literally the applicator tip on this Tough Glide stuff here. This isn't hardened steel, but yeah, just as I was squeezing some of it out, dragging it across there, we got that scratched line on there. And like I said, that's happened to me on some like 14C28N that's been hardened to like 55 to 57, something like that, which 14C still does a decent job at that. It was kind of designed to be a blade steel that could have a heat treat between 55 and like 61 or something like that. A huge margin, whereas most other knife steels generally don't have that margin, including this. So yeah, I haven't done a full cut test on this, but I have cut it until it's like the knife was probably a little past a working edge or something like that. And it didn't take any time at all. I've had D2 that cuts much better than this, unfortunately. But it still strops up super nice. I was able to bring it back to a really, really nice sharp edge just by using a strop after that fact. But yeah, on the website they do, I don't remember if it was 59 to 61 or 60 to 62 that they had stated for this guy. Either way, I can guarantee that just didn't happen on this particular sample here. One other thing to note, the plunge grind on this thing is actually terrible, and to be able to get that fully done on both sides there created a heck of a smile on there, which is annoying because you have this gap that's kind of intrinsic with most crossbar lock models and stuff like that, and you can still see that plunge grind start transition. So I don't know why they went all lazy with it. They should have just done a pretty sharp transition on it to prevent that kind of smile thing from happening. And then I have a couple of nitpicks that aren't necessarily negative, just something that I would prefer. Is well, these thumb discs are okay. Does well for a slow roll. You can get behind there because it does have that little pointy bit at the end to be able to do that, and it's ambidextrous, so it works on either side. However, trying to do a reverse flick on this guy, there's a lot of things going on with it that doesn't work quite as well. If they just had a standard thumb stud, that would help out a little bit, but it also would help if we had a bit more of a detent going on here from a little bit stronger springs. But we also have these axis wings on here, and they stick up at the back. That makes it easier for you to pull back on them, I guess, rather than getting your thumb over it or something like that. Something we've seen with like out the front actuators or something like that. Same kind of idea, but this makes it really difficult for you to get your index finger out of the way of it without it coming into contact as the blade's opening. So it's really, really hard to end up doing a reverse flick. and as such, it feels a little funky if you do like to use your index finger or middle finger trying to close the knife that way rather than reaching around with your thumb. Still works, but it's a little funky feeling. And also, these thumb studs do actually cover a decent amount of the cutting path here. Which, if they just had that stud thing up at the top, wouldn't have been that much of an issue. And that's not necessarily a terrible thing, especially because they ramp up. But they are basically super glued or epoxied onto the blade. There's no way to actually remove them. I feel like if they took this part, the flats up here, and extended it a little bit to be able to put a screw there to kind of secure this with a screw, and then you can do whatever Loctite kind of shenanigans you might want to at the factory. But it still leaves the option for you to be able to take that off. That helps if you are doing some freestyle sharpening or something like that. If I can hold a knife straight to be able to move across the stone, I like that. With this, you really do have to come up at quite a bit more of an angle, and that does get a little annoying trying to drag that across the stone. So just I would prefer overall to have a little bit more of an attachment system for these guys rather than them just being epoxied on. The crossbar wings, which are titanium, do actually rub up against the steel liners on the inside, and it does kind of make this central streak going on here. Doesn't feel bad, doesn't feel like terrible grindy metal on metal, but it does end up kind of changing the finish that that those liners had on the inside there. The back spacer's all right. It does protrude out, which is kind of interesting. It ends up working out all right if you do want to hold that in that gas station ninja kind of reverse hammer grip sort of style there, and the handle does support that rather well. What we're doing with jimping up top here, I have no idea. There's no way that you can possibly interact with that in a reverse grip. And it's not something that I really feel adds anything when I'm gripping the knife otherwise. You might feel it a little bit in a pinch grip, but you already have so much grip on the knife at that point that that extra traction. So I'm guessing that's much more of an aesthetic choice or whatever. So yeah, there's what we got going on with that. Next up, I purchased this at the same time, but it was a pre-order, and it was like a month and a half out or so that I got it. This is another Tao model. The handles look similar, but not the same. So I don't necessarily know what constitutes a Tao model for them and what doesn't. But yeah, there we go. So this is a Sheepfoot Tao, which does improve on some things quite a bit, but still has some problems. This one is in Van steel. They decided to switch over to Van for a while. And unfortunately, I have also not all that much experience with Van. I know it has less edge retention capabilities than Elmax does, but it's kind of one of those, corrosion-proof steels like LC200N on steroids or something like that. But this thing was also very, very easy to reprofile. Easier than some D2 that I've experienced as, kind of one of those things. It still took about 45 minutes to do a full reprofile. And that includes going through all the different sharpening stones and stropping and all that sort of stuff, which is unfortunate because, again, this was about $270. But we do have jimping up top here. Oh, that is something that I forgot to mention is this guy doesn't have any jimping on the top of him, and it's dying for some. I would love to have some up there to keep my thumb from moving around. They could have done something like taking these thumb paddles and actually making them flush at the top here with the spine of the blade there, and then added some texturing onto them if they didn't want to do anything on the blade itself. That would have helped. But either way, yeah, this thing doesn't have any jimping on the top, whereas the Sheepfoot Tao does. And that jimping is great for the standard grip there, which is I'm going to call it a full four-finger grip, but that fourth finger does kind of grip around the butt of the knife as it kicks up here. You, of course, can choke up, but at that point, for me, I'm not interfacing with much of the jimping, but that's all right. We still have that wire pocket clip. If we had the lock bar cut out any wider than it was, this pocket clip could easily get jammed in there. That's not the case, so that's all sorts of good. But figured I would mention that. This thing has a few deployment options. We got that hole, which I can reverse flip this knife out, and that feels all sorts of great. We got a front flipper, which ends up working out great, even though we don't have jimping fully up on it or around the corner. And we also have this this back flipper tab, which means get your finger out the way. Otherwise, yeah, the front flipper is going to get you. So you can't do a push button on this, and you can't do a lazy light switch flick. You got to really get your finger out the way if you want to use that back flipper on there. This one does have a nice sharpening choil on it, though, and the plunge grind ends before the blade starts, so that's great. We don't have any smiles or anything like that from a reprofile. I might have would have preferred having this be flush with the handle scales just for ease and comfort when you're choked up, but that is what the back flipper tab is, so that would have to have been kind of compromised, if you will, to be able to do that. And some kind of random thing here. This is a titanium pivot collar. It's kind of got that lightning strike anodization where you heat it up and douse it in ferric chloride instead of putting electric current through it. I have seen some reviews inaccurately say that this is Damascus, and it's not. It's still a high-end material. It's just not several forms of titanium mixed together. It's just one that's been anodized. So, alrighty, there was that. So yeah, blade steel's soft on both of these guys, which is unfortunate for the prices on them. Like I said, these are about $270 a piece, and both of these guys are using fairly exotic blade steels, but it seems like they didn't really put in a whole lot of either they were both improperly done, or maybe I'm just the unluckiest person on the planet and got two bad heat-treated knives in a row from different batches. But yeah, that is kind of annoying that they are much softer than they really should be for the price that you end up paying on these guys. Kind of seems like they were interested in using the blade steels and getting that on kind of some of the marketing and specs list for the knives, but didn't really put in the time and effort to actually figure out how to heat treat all of these different blade steels. It's possible that they tried to heat treat both of these guys like some of their other blade steels that they've used before, like M390 or something like that, but all knife steels aren't heat treated exactly the same. If they were, Damascus steels of any sort of combination would be absolutely easy to do, and they're not. So that's kind of the way that ends up kind of shaking out, which is just a little unfortunate. I will say, let's see, that they're, yeah. I will say that I've certainly seen my fair share of knives in steel that hasn't exactly had a stellar heat treat on them, like a lot of some of these earlier Tucson's for sure certainly fit that bill. I don't remember exactly if this one had a terrible heat treat or not. I don't think it had an incredibly terrible one, but yeah, this is an M390. But part of the justification I can generally have for myself there is that I'm not paying all that much. Sure, this is maybe not the best heat-treated M390, but I only paid like $72 for this knife, not $270, which at that price you can get some pretty damn good offerings, even from the United States or, well, Italy might not be the exact best thing, speaking of some poorly heat-treated steel in the past, but that's beside the point. But you get what I'm saying there, is that you are definitely paying a premium for these knives, and you're paying a premium for a lot of the materials, including the blades, but it seems like they kind of dropped the ball on the blade steel kind of portion on there. So I will mention a little bit here at the end. One other thing that I don't know, for me just makes me feel a little funky is this, and I've only seen this on the Sheepfoot towel where they have their logo kind of milled in there, the K. But kind of glancing at it in a way, to me it really looks and feels a bit, especially with its location, feels a little bit too much like they saw a Chris Reeve knife and went, yeah, that's what we want. Rather than trying to do something a little bit more original. Like, obviously their logo is going to be original. But yeah, I don't know. That just kind of rubs me maybe a little bit the wrong way. So overall, yeah, the knives are fantastic. They have amazing action. Really, really drop shutty. I have a couple of Kaisers that actually do fall shut a little bit quicker, but these feel nice and glassy smooth all the way down. So they feel a little bit better. So that's great. There's a lot of amazing things to say about them. Just unfortunately their performance, and then a lot of problems with this guy. So one thing that I will say is, and this will probably be a little bit of a rant here at the end of the video. So if you're not interested, that's fine. But I got interested in both of these guys after seeing Metal Complex do a review on them. And this is something that I can say, and then I'll have a little bit of likening on there. I don't look down upon the folks that never use their knives. I'm not part of that use your shit hashtag where people are absolutely upset that someone will never actually use a knife in the real world. A lot of people like things for the objects that they are, or things that or feelings and thoughts that are evoked by them and all that sort of stuff. And that happens a lot in the knife community. One, because a lot of people, myself included, really shouldn't or can't afford to just continue buying knives and then using them all, because trying to sell a knife used destroys the amount of people who are interested in actually purchasing the knife afterwards. Almost everybody wants something absolutely pristine, which means you can't use your knife, because then you can't sell it, and that ruins the ability for you to sell it off to be able to experience a new knife. I kind of understand that. I liken that a lot to something like Retro Gaming Collection. This is an old TurboGrafx game. I don't think it's really a very expensive or rare one, but hey, it's just one I pulled off the shelf. And yeah, it's neat, but most people, myself included, are never going to actually pull out the original hardware for this guy, the TurboGrafx 16, and try to figure out how to get the old RF video signal into a newer TV and worry about latency and all that sort of stuff, or purchase a CRT TV for it. So it sits on the shelf as an interesting object. If they're going to play this game at all, they're going to emulate it, unless, there are some really hardcore folks out there who really appreciate absolutely being 100% authentic to how it was way, way, way back in the day, but it's very few and far between. So if someone's going to play this game today, they're going to bust out an emulator for it, or maybe it's on a collection that's been put out on a modern system or something like that, which is still emulation, just from the actual company, rather than you doing it illicitly on your own. And it's kind of the same sort of thing that I think about with these guys, where it's neat, it's something physical. I can hold it, I can fondle it, I can definitely fidget with it, and all of that. Really appreciate it for the object that it is, but actually using it takes it a step further, and something that requires a little bit more dedication or willingness to essentially lose money by not being able to sell it, or sell it for a very, very low price compared to how a new one would be. So, yeah, I don't necessarily look down on people who do that. However, that it does miss out on a portion of a knife, which is how well does it actually do at the tool it's designed to be. And if you can't cut anything with a knife that's specifically designed for cutting, that is its purpose, then you can't really evaluate how good it is at its job. You can eyeball and see that something has a thicker geometry like these guys do, rather than something like a Civivi or something like that that uses a bit thinner geometry than either of these guys do. But as far as like actually being able to determine how hard or soft a steel is, or any of that sort of stuff, you actually have to use the knife. Whether you use it or I don't know, possibly get an HRC check done on it, but that puts a physical mark on the blade, which a lot of people won't like either. So it's just one of those difficult things. Looking at a lot of knife reviews, if someone doesn't actually use or sharpen a knife or something like that, I personally view it as them kind of viewing it as an object, which is perfectly fine, but it doesn't give you the whole story. It gives you about 80% instead of 100% on the knife there. And, a good portion of how well a knife performs, I think, really has proportional sort of stuff with price on it. And these guys being at $270, yeah, they are using high-end materials with titanium and the fancy blade steels, which I don't think they're lying about those blade steels, but they didn't put the time and effort and or possibly learning how to properly heat treat these blade steels, but they're still charging you a price that you expect that they've done that research. So yeah, that's kind of unfortunate, but there we go. There's kind of my thoughts there. There's a couple other models that have come out recently that I was kind of interested in taking a look at. I think the Padre and the Chad both looked kind of interesting. The Chad essentially looks exactly like the X-Tao, but with a sheep's foot blade. So kind of a mix between these two. I don't know why it's not considered a Tao model. Their naming convention doesn't make any sense to me. But they're using a blade steel now called PM60, which is it's a powder metallurgy steel. It's been around for a very, very long time, since the 70s at least. And its advantage, a lot like the Rex 45 and Rex 121 blade steels, is that it can get incredibly hard, like 68 HRC, and that's what gives it its advantage. However, seeing their progress that they've had with these guys, or just the results that I've ended up seeing with this, they probably don't know how to heat treat that either. And it's just going to be another one of those, well, it's a new fancy blade steel. A lot of people haven't heard of it, so that makes them interested in it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the blade steel is going to perform like it, but they're going to charge like it does. And that's something that does bother me a little bit. So, for the most part, and I'll probably try to revisit these guys, I don't know, years in the future, but I'm not interested in any of their current models because of just how much the blade steels have let me down on this, and also a lot of design questionability that I have with the X-Tao here. But there we go. There's my thoughts. I hope everything was articulate as much as possible. I really wanted to try to keep this video under 20 minutes, but there's just too much stuff for me to try to cover in there. So, alrighty. As always, I appreciate y'all for watching. Have yourself a wonderful rest of your day, yo. And like, comment, and subscribe if you feel like doing that sort of thing since you made it this far in the video. Catch y'all in the next one.